Actually, let's take a look at what people do care about. Let's do that. All right. Let me bring up what people actually do care about, and then we'll look at the generic ballots. We'll look at the generic ballot. We'll look at 2024. All right. I'm burning through as quick as I can here to get as much information to you guys as possible. All right. Inflation has officially overtaken jobs and the economy as the number one voting issue. Let me make this bigger because I could see it small. I did it by party detail. Democrats even started to suffer with educated people. When you hurt somebody's pocket, it's true. When you hurt somebody's pocket, then you get their attention real damn quick. A major problem Donald Trump had, and Republicans had in 18, and then Donald Trump had in 20, is that they essentially solved the number one issues. I mean, people were feeling good about the economy. Even after the pandemic, they felt like things were going to be brighter if they were Donald Trump's voters. Obviously that was the case even more so. But Democrats effectively used a pandemic to change not only the political landscape, but the rules of the game. It's the only way they beat Donald Trump. It's just true. By the way, we can talk about the state. I know people, I see the questions about Pennsylvania. And folks, Pennsylvania's not alone. It comes after Wisconsin. No, nobody invalidated or decertified or anything like that. But it is true that these judges ruled that all of these ballots were illegal. It was unconstitutional, as we told you for months and months leading up into the election. But Democrats effectively use COVID to change the political landscape. I want you to look where COVID is now on most important issues. It has slid to a very distant number 3, and it's about to be overtaken by immigration. Immigration is soaring. This thing doubled, and I strongly suspect, and it's actually more than that, because there were some other responses that were immigration specific. They didn't want to just say immigration and border security. So technically, it would probably be close to tied with COVID if we did include those people. And here's the shtick when it comes to COVID. 11% who chose it as their most important voting issue. We followed up and asked how they felt about the policies themselves. You have half of them now choosing COVID, almost a little bit less than half now choosing COVID because they actually feel that those policies need to remain where they are. They don't want stricter. 52.2% of those want stricter policies. So we're looking at about 5.8% of the electorate who think it's vital to break us over COVID restrictions again. That's it. The hysteria is over. Another quarter think that those policies are too strict, and a little bit less think that they're all right. So what I'm telling you is, even those who pick COVID are not universal mask-wearing Marys who think that we need to crush the U.S. economy to stop somebody from getting a sniffle. It's over. Why do you think you see everybody pushing for February 1st? Why do you think you heard Boris Johnson say what he heard? Why do you think all these Democrats on Sunday shows are trying to tamper down the fanatics that they created? And Barry Weiss making news going on Bill Maher. I'm over it. Which stirred controversy. Because they created these fanatic monsters. The good news is they are a very tiny minority now. The bad news is they exist in the first place. But this is basically a mental disorder at this point. And speaking of which, I was looking at some stats on traffic accidents, which soared last year. Deadly traffic accidents as well. And what do they blame people for? What are they blaming? The transportation department? They are blaming increased drug and alcohol use that people are turning to deal with pandemic-related stress. So congratulations. You actually exacerbated an already real problem, which is honestly probably worse than COVID. Our drug and alcohol addiction level in this country is serious. Now, COVID is serious to some people, but COVID it's indiscriminate in infecting you, but it's not indiscriminate in taking your life. Drug and alcohol addiction is. Anybody can succumb to it, including the People's Pundit, including Navy SEALs, including presidents and their children. By the way, if you didn't see Laura's Getter post before, you should go look at it. it got it's hilarious, but it's sadly true. I went on it. I went on a rant about it earlier in the week. Like, we're doing this for what? To enable Hunter Biden? I just somebody has to explain to me, because apparently the public, agrees with me. Somebody has to explain to me what exactly we're doing this for. Is it just to make sure that, some privileged little snob has the money to buy Chinese hookers and crack? Come on. Don't you think American sons and daughters deserve more than that? Husbands and wives deserve more than this? All right, that's mitigation policies aren't strict enough. Let's go back first before I jump into inflation detail. I just want to point this out. Look at the difference between Republican and independent sentiment versus Democratic sentiment. Where 17% of Democrats still believe COVID is the number one issue. 14% view jobs in the economy as the number one issue. And 19%, less than everyone else, views cost of living and inflation as the number one issue. It is also true that less than everybody else, Democrats view the economy and jobs as the number one issue. They don't think immigration and border security is an issue, basically, at all. They live look, and I'm not, if you're a Democrat listening right now, I'm not saying this to be mean. I'm saying this as a matter of fact. You're living in your own world. You are living in your own world. Everybody else is putting their pocketbook first and the well-being of their family first. And I wonder how much of this is earnest. I truly do. Do you want COVID to be the number one issue because you know that you benefit when everyone's scared and locked down and you get universal mail-in voting without the judges telling you it's unconstitutional? So how much of this really is earnest? You don't think they see what everyone else sees at the grocery store? I don't buy that I just don't buy that for a second. I think there's a little bit of dishonesty here. You could just close your eyes if you want and pretend it doesn't exist. Almost identical percentages of Republicans and independents and third-party voters view cost of living as the number one issue. Almost an identical number of Republicans and independents view the economy and jobs as the number one issue. You can see third-party voters, you have a lot of younger liberal voters who do take climate change very seriously. They're in line with Democrats. They're that group anyway. And then you have, they do care about public education, right a little bit more than even major two-party voters do. They don't like critical race theory. So if you're wondering which end of the spectrum they're on that, they're on it's funny because those who chose the environment and climate change clearly lean toward the Democratic position there, but those who chose education lean to the Republican position. Um, they're more in line again with Republicans and Democrat and independents when it comes to COVID. They are a little bit less on the economy and jobs, but you can see how many chose inflation. And when we talk, so inflation, as I expected and predicted, has overtaken even jobs in the economy as the number one issue. And that's fair for people to point out and say, how is inflation not an economic issue? That's a fair point. But we're taking it out here explicitly because we're trying to see, we're not talking about the labor market. We're not talking about the health of a specific sector. We're not talking about the economy and jobs as it may relate to trade policy. We're not talking about any of those other things. We're specifically talking about the rise in the price of goods and how much it is impacting everyday living, the cost of living. So it's fair to wrap these all up as economic issues. So, like, how would I say that if I wanted to wrap them together? I would say economic concerns. And then I would split them up. Do you mean inflation? Do you mean this? But we want to know what specifically about inflation and cost of living they're talking about. So I'm not going to do 3 levels of logic just to find that out. If they're choosing inflation and cost of living, rest assured they're economic voters. So if we did put it together, I mean, COVID is a minor issue this year. It's just true compared to other things. This is turning out to be an environment Republicans really want. All right, so let's look at what they're talking about here. This is funny because we are seeing pretty much broad agreement. Hold on, I'm needing water again. I'm really Rubioing out over here. You know why? It's one of those like cold thirsts. It's cold, it's going to snow. And it's like one of those thirsts for when you're actually cold. A lot of people don't realize how badly cold can dehydrate somebody. Cold can sap water right out of your body. It's no joke. All right, but okay. Clearly, food and groceries. And let's read this question. Specifically regarding cost of living and inflation. Which would you say most concerns you? And you can see this is a sub-sample. If they chose cost of living, we asked them this question. Everybody got the questions about shortages and price increases. But we only wanted to ask those who chose cost of living and inflation, which you can see here. I decided I probably should put the logic on the crosstabs for you guys, just so people know and there's no confusion. If question number 12 is one of the following answers, cost of living, inflation, then they get this question. That's what that means. All right. Now, by party, you can see there's widespread agreement between Republicans and Democrats on food and groceries being the major problem. This is why you're seeing some liberals joining now with the very small remaining number of conservative Democrats in being dissatisfied with the president and the Democratic Congress. To the point where there is an overlap, even though, let me put it this way, even though Trump, his top line is a little bit less than Republicans on the generic ballot, not by much, Trump wins some Democratic voters over that Republicans aren't winning. The difference between Trump and the generic ballot, Trump's lead and a Republican lead on the generic ballot, is that the independent margin for Republicans is bigger than the margin that would vote for Donald Trump. But Trump gets more crossover from Democrats. And by the way, locals, if you want to jump ahead and look at something, look at that hypothetical matchup with Trump and Biden. Look at Hispanics. All right, I'm not going to spoil it. Look at Hispanics. If you haven't since yesterday, I almost came out of the chair. Republicans win more white votes. Trump, his coalition is more diverse. How much does that burn the asses of some of these Republicans who say that they have to move on from Donald Trump so they're not branded with the stigma of racism and blah, 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 blah. Nobody actually believes that in the electorate. Trump's coalition is more brown, more black than Republicans. Republicans do a little bit better with white voters and marginally better with Asian voters, but it's hilarious. It's hilarious to me. It's not at all surprising, but it's hilarious. Because I have listened to these schmucks privately. Well, publicly, they go on Fox News and they praise them up and down all the time. But then publicly, they would go to like my friends asking for like millions of dollars. And they would tell them, once we really get rid of Donald Trump, we're really going to grow among black community. We're really going to grow with that Hispanic vote. They're really Republicans, They're really Republicans. They got like that 30-year-old saying. And and Donald Trump does significantly better with these people. And what was a little bit shocked to me is the females. I think, and I don't look, ladies, I'm not trying to step in it here, so don't get mad at me. I think that women are more sensitive when they go to the grocery store and see these price increases. They see these shortages, because that really can only explain why it is that more women are more angry than men on a lot of these things. Why more women say, you know what, the hell with you, I'd vote for Donald Trump, than some men. And very clearly, which I wanted to put up on Locals, I'm going to do it after the show, I'll do it later today, the social bias indicators, how much worse is it really? Because women are consistently more likely than men to say they're very uncomfortable being honest with pollsters about their political beliefs. Conservatives are consistently more likely than liberals. Rural voters are consistently more likely, rural and suburban, by the way, than urban voters. So it's like you have this potential here for this sneak vote that is only leaning to one side. So how much worse is it really going to be? Maybe that's how even like somebody like Monmouth gets a 7-point lead for Jack Murphy. He could win 7 to 11%, and then he's barely scraping by, and or Phil Murphy, excuse me, and then he's barely scraping by against Jack Citarelli, because those women really did just go into the voting booth and say, "The hell with it. The hell with these people." That's how that happens. All right, food and groceries, 47.1%. You can see the agreement here again, getting back to that. Housing and shelter, number 2. Interesting, because if you poll a place like California, statewide or in districts like we're polling right now in the Valley and elsewhere, by the way, that's a whole other segment. Republicans are just rolling over like a bunch of cowards in a district they absolutely can win, because there's what they believe to be a moderate Democrat. Shame, 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 shame. Democrats play for every single seat. It's once in a lifetime opportunity to take an open seat in the Valley, and they're schmucks. Anyway, it's all to get rid of the Trumpism in the party. Anyway, housing and shelter is now 19.6, overtook gas and fuel this month. 13.5% said gas and fuel. Republicans and independents are much, much more concerned, and as are third-party voters, than Democrats about the price of gas and fuel. Why is that? Could it be that they disproportionately live in urban areas and other areas where there is public transportation? I don't know, but good hypothesis. I mean, I know that it is the case that they do. They simply don't use gas like suburban and rural America do. And if you look at housing and shelter, they're more likely than Republicans to say housing and shelter. Why is that? Home ownership is higher among Republicans. 22.2% of independents also are concerned about it, as are 28.1%, which is really what accounted for that rising in housing and shelter. Tax and taxation is now 8.7% to include 7.5% of Democrats feel they're being overtaxed. 10% of Republicans, 8% of independents, 12% of third-party voters. All right. Medical healthcare, not an issue to third-party voters. It is a marginal issue for independents. Actually, amazingly, Republicans are starting to care more. Why? The cost. They do pay for their insurance. Can I just be real? There are a lot of low-income Democrats who don't pay for their insurance. Utilities and electric, 5%, which is pretty incredible how even and across the board it was. And Joe Biden's favorite got a whopping 2 responses. Transportation and vehicles. Yes, Joe, everyone's concerned about the price of used cars on the car lot. They so prioritize that over food and groceries and rent and their mortgage. Nobody cares, Joe. It's amazing how out of touch. And it's not it's a uniparty issue. It's amazing how out of touch these people are. It's just, honestly, it's incredible.
Hi folks, Rich Baris, the People's Pundit, host of Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit, and co-host of What Are the Odds with Barnes and Baris. If you liked what the New York Post called above average transparency, then go ahead and like the page, share the videos, and hit that notification bell. It'll let you know when we're going to go live.